Welcome to the Doctoring Differently podcast. I'm Dr. Naomi Lawrence-Reid, your host, a pediatrician and creator of Doctoring Differently, where I teach physicians how to explore exciting, flexible, and lucrative careers beyond full-time clinical medicine. Each week, we're diving into a topic to help you doctor differently. Follow us everywhere on social media at Doctoring Differently and subscribe to the podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Now let's get to today's episode. Today, we're diving into a crucial topic for every physician at some point in our careers: contract negotiation. Now, I know the chill that used to come over me when I would hear about negotiating because as doctors, we are never taught how to negotiate for ourselves at any point in our training. That's not our fault, but we can and we should negotiate every employment contract, and we can learn how to do it. Whether you're just starting out or looking to make a career transition, understanding the fine print of your contract is key to ensuring that you're getting the best possible terms. Joining us today are legal and contract negotiation experts who will share invaluable insights into how to approach your contract, what to look out for, and how to advocate for yourself. So if you've ever wondered how to negotiate out of that non-compete clause, how to secure a better salary, or ensure a work-life balance that works for you, this episode is for you. Let's get started. First up, we have Michael Johnson, an attorney based in Wisconsin who specializes in physician contracts and has helped countless physicians navigate the often confusing world of employment agreements. You can find Michael on Instagram at Physician Contracts, where he regularly posts educational content about contracts for physicians at all stages in their careers. Okay, first question. Are physician contracts negotiable? Are they?
They are.
Okay.
They are very negotiable. We get a lot of changes in physician contracts. The amount of changes depends on your leverage. How valuable are you? How strong is the employer's negotiation leverage? What are the facts around you? Look, if you go to the biggest, most attractive employer in your geographic area with, and they know that you need a job in 2 or 3 months. Right? And you don't really have another competing offer in the same geographic region. Like they kind of know this. Then often, no, you're probably going to take what they give you.
That's right.
Now, if you're negotiating 9 to 18 months in advance and you're looking at multiple offers and you're informed and you understand how to ask questions during the interview process and, you're willing to maybe risk a little bit during the negotiation process.
What do you mean by risk? Risk a little bit?
You can get some changes. If you have to take this job, if you have no other option, then how far can I go? Can I really push them to negotiate down that 2-year, 40-mile non-compete? Do we have a viable threat of saying, look, this doesn't work for us. We're going to go somewhere else. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you can say that to an employer, either your current employer or a job that you're interviewing with, if you can say, no, this doesn't work for me, thank you, but no thanks, then often they'll at least consider something else. It really just depends.
Okay, so what tactics do institutions use to discourage a physician from even attempting to negotiate?
Yeah, so one of the most common is to provide an offer letter that has some really, really attractive terms.
Okay.
They show you a massive base salary. Okay. It's like many multiples of what you're currently making in residency or fellowship, right?
Okay.
And they'll offer you a signing bonus, and they'll offer you moving stipend, and they'll probably throw in a CME budget, and they'll say, here is the deal. What do you think? Are you ready to accept?
Oh, wow.
And we're probably going to continue talking about this, but there's non-competes. There's things called non-solicit clauses. There's term and termination clauses. There's all of the just gnarly details about how you get out of a contract. And then there's also future compensation. Usually future compensation is not tied to base salary. It's based on some measure of volume.
Okay.
And some amount of money that you make per unit of volume. So these offer letters, really don't tell you the whole picture. A lot of times they're chock full of the attractive distractors. Basically, everything that's going to make you feel good
Sure.
about a job, and then they're going to say, "Hey, do you accept?" And then a lot of physicians are like, "Well, I heard about these things called non-competes or whatever," but then they'll say, "Well, the contract is standard. It's boilerplate. Everybody signs it. It's not negotiable." They make you feel little.
Yeah, they do.
Even though we know on this side, like in our law firm, we get major employers to change important things about their contracts all the time. Like, there's no guarantees that it's going to happen for you, okay? But when they tell you it's standard and boilerplate and it's not negotiable, that's just not true. We see it all the time on our side.
You are right, but as I talk to so many physicians, we I don't is it Stockholm syndrome? It's something very close, but we have since our early 20s have entered these medical schools, these institutions that are very hierarchical, patriarchal. Everything they say is Bible, right? It is law, it is truth, it is science, and we march through medical school residency, and what they say we do. So when we enter into a world of potential negotiations, and we're told we're not able to, or not allowed to, quote unquote allowed to, we have that same, I think, trust, but also feeling of, you're right, like feeling insignificant in comparison to XYZ medical center or XYZ University School of Medicine campus, So you are absolutely correct. But I certainly understand how physicians come into this with the mindset of, okay, they said I can't, and I'm just here to serve, and I'm here to just have a job and to start seeing patients. And they don't want to make people, quote unquote, mad. And deep down, I think we are scared that an offer would be rescinded by even attempting to negotiate. Have you ever seen that?
Sure. So offers certainly can be rescinded. We see in the firm about a 1 to 300 chance that a physician, after receiving an offer letter, then receiving a contract, will make a handful of reasonable requests. Okay. If you go totally like off the reservation, then yeah, you might get your offer pulled. But you make a handful of reasonable, good faith requests. You make a little request around the non-compete, or maybe something around your signing bonus. About 1 in 300 times that offer is pulled. Okay. If you can't risk 1 in 300, then we really can't ask it, like, kind of have to sign the deal, right?
Sure.
But if you can risk something, then yes, we can make those requests. And also, like, if you want to get more aggressive, if you want to make let's say they're offering $50 per work RVU, and you say, hey, the MGMA median is, 62.97, would you match that? And they say no, and we don't want people even asking for median compensation per work RVU rate, so goodbye. That is something that you need to be prepared for.
And is
now,
that a
I
place
say
you would
that,
even want to work? Sorry to interrupt. As you're saying that, is that a place
yeah,
I'd
that's
even
exactly
want
where
to
I was
work?
going, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're asking for some basics, right? You're asking for a median compensation per work RVU ratio, okay? You're asking for some sort of definition around your call schedule.
Yes.
First draft employment agreements say, call shall be determined in the sole discretion of the employer. But during that interview process, I bet you dollars to donuts that they promise call is never worse than Q5 or Q10. And you're like, I just want that promise to be in the contract.
Yes.
Okay. If you break down my law practice, like half of my law practice is taking the job posting and the interview promises and the offer letter, comparing them to the contract. Usually they're quite different. And just asking for the most important promises that the physician is actually relying upon to take a job, asking to pull those into the contract. So if some of the most basic ones they're unwilling to even consider, and they want to pull the offer because you're asking about those at the contract stage,
yes,
I would call that a big problem. I would say that you're probably dodging a bullet, and you might want to be maybe thankful about that. Now, I do see some physicians that negotiate maybe without a full picture in store. and maybe do ask for the wrong things or go a little bit too far and then do get an offer pulled because of the nature and the extent of their requests. It's really hard when you've never negotiated
Sure.
a contract worth well into seven figures. All of your physician contracts will have multiple $1 million flow through it within the first 5 to 10 years. These are not like little ticky-tack contracts, right? So I'd encourage folks to get some professional help at this stage. But yeah, if you're asking for some reasonable requests and they pull the deal, then often, yeah, that's a red flag, and we would maybe dodge a bullet.
It sounds like it. And that was one of the major questions is how much of those almost handshake verbal deals in the interview should go in the actual written contract. I think probably every physician has encountered that. We get into the job and it's, we've got much more call. We have longer clinics. We don't have the support we thought we would, or the support that was promised in the interview. So I fully agree with it sounds like, as you're saying, getting as much put in writing as possible.
One thing that I have seen is that when folks talk to each other, it's very difficult for both to hear and understand clearly. There are times during the interview process where you hear call will never be worse than Q5, when what they're really saying is right now it's Q5. And we're going to try our best to keep it that way. Those are two very different things, right? If you're relying upon a specific promise, right, to take a job over a different job, then we might want to clarify exactly what that promise is, how far they're willing to go. Yeah, I do also see some advantage to asking the important questions at the contract stage. Maybe that promise doesn't actually get into the contract, but if someone writes back to you, let's say our Q5 call hypothet, okay? Someone writes back to you and says, we don't put that in the contract, but we will not allow call to be worse than Q5. We always hire locums to cover excess call if that ever becomes a problem. Okay, let's say they say that instead.
Okay.
I would say that's very helpful. The A level here would be to have it in the contract. A step down from that is having a very clear written promise during the contract negotiation stage that X will happen. Right. And if they decide to do something different, then at least you have an email, something in writing to go to somebody and say, hey, this was not the promise that was made to me when I agreed to take this job. I realize it's been a few years and probably the administrator that made this promise to me may or may not be here anymore. That's a problem, but here's what the deal was. Can you honor this? And I think a lot of employers are motivated to keep the promises made to physicians during that process. But if it's not in writing, if there's nothing else to go on except for a memory from several years ago, then we don't really have that much. But yeah.
So how are you negotiating have you ever been successful in completely removing a non-compete clause in a physician's contract, or is the angle more to reduce the time, the radius, and just describe for maybe a resident who's kind of hearing these words for the first time, what that even means if they were to leave a job with a non-compete clause, how that would restrict them?
Yeah, so let's back up what a non-compete is. A non-compete clause restricts typically geographically where you can work both during and after employment. So it survives the end of your contract. You can't be like, yeah, I terminated that contract, so who cares what's in it, Michael? It doesn't matter anymore. Remember, I terminated it. That's not how these work. You have obligations to the employer that survive the end of your employment, often for 2 years. I saw one 3 years yesterday, but 2 years or 1 year is much more common. And they typically want to protect you, prevent you from being able to practice medicine in their catchment area where they typically receive patients. Okay. Right. To your question of have you seen employers remove them in full? They will, probably less likely though. They will on occasion, but there are other clauses in physician contracts that can have the same or even more punitive impact on physicians than a non-compete. The non-solicit clause speaks to what you can do with the valuable relationships that you develop during your employment.
I see.
So, for example, let's say you want to leave. Let's say you're a dermatologist. You want to leave a hospital and you want to practice close by. You want to take with you your favorite nurse, your favorite MA, your favorite front office staff. Basically, you want to fire the boss and start up your own little practice across the street, right? Take all your favorite staff. That'd be great. And you want all of your patients to find you, follow you. Yeah, maybe you want to market directly to those former patients, okay?
Right.
Maybe you want to reach out to everyone that previously referred you patients, okay? All of your referral sources. Maybe you want to keep your hospital privileges and continue. I guess in dermatology this doesn't make a ton of sense, or always makes sense, but maybe you want to keep taking call at the same hospital that you previously took call at for the employer. You want to maintain all of those valuable relationships, okay? The non-solicit clause often says, no, you can't take advantage of any of those relationships. So a former patient tries to, continue working with you at your new practice. Some physician contracts go as far as to say you have to turn that patient away. Some say you can't practice at any of the facilities that any of our physicians in the group have privileges at.
Wow.
It can be pretty rough.
Yes.
Depending on your specialty, that can be the functional equivalent of a non-compete.
Right.
Okay. Same for patients, same for advertising in the same same area. So the employers, kind of getting back to your first question, sorry for this roundabout lawyerly answer.
I'm here.
Employers that remove non-competes in full typically only do so when there's a super punitive non-solicit clause that effectively does the same thing or more in their contract. So it's like, hey, congrats, you won, go ahead and sign the contract. And then we look at it and we're like, oh, that was not the worst piece of this exit strategy. The worst piece was actually the non-solicit clause. Sometimes they even want to leave the non-compete in.
Yeah. No.
If I know for sure that you can go 10.1 miles away from a practice and do what you want to, then that might be an easier thing to plan for than a vague, nondescript, potentially super broad non-solicit clause. So again, watch out for negotiating things before you see the full picture.
I see.
Because if you only see half the chessboard, you don't know what the other clauses are doing. You might be asking for something that has little to no value. Now, we do see employers that will say, no, we don't negotiate the non-compete, or we don't remove the non-compete in full. But they will consider reasonable changes. Let's say instead of 2 years, they might consider 1 year. Instead of 40 miles, they might consider 10 miles.
Sure.
Another good one is the reason for termination. If the employer terminates without cause, okay, this open question, should they be able to enforce the non-compete?
Next, we're joined by Elena Raileanu, a seasoned human resources director and physician recruiter based in Boston, who will give us a few practical tips on negotiating from the employer's perspective and what to expect during the hiring process. Check out her Instagram at nextstop.dreamjob for tons of great interviewing advice. Let's talk money. So where, and a lot of what I talk about focuses on money and doctors talking about money and not being afraid to have those conversations early in negotiations. So at what point does that come up? Say a recruiter reaches out and has a glowing job for me, but they didn't talk about the salary. What do I do?
The salary negotiation should really be part of the first conversation and should continue until there's an offer accepted. Once you accepted the offer, be a professional and stick to it, unless there's a big surprise. But it starts with the first conversation. It changes. It's agile. And then it ends when the offer is accepted. So if you're having a conversation with a recruiter and the topic of money doesn't come up yet, then you can be the one initiating that conversation by simply asking, what is the salary range for this role. And ideally, they tell you, well, the salary range is between $50 and $75 an hour, for example. Great. That's awesome. You don't commit to anything. You just say, thank you so much for sharing. You don't say, that's great. That works for me. No, just say, thank you so much. Show gratitude. What if they say, oh, we can't really share the range. We have a policy where we want candidates to interview, and after 2 months of interviewing, we assess their worth and the impact they can do to the organization, and then we can make them an offer. And then you can say, thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to continue to work with you with the perspective of working for your hospital. When you are ready to share the range, I'm so happy to continue the conversation.
You did obviously that really well. Yeah, keep going.
There's pressure building, and they say, okay, right. Sure. I cannot bypass Dr. Naomi Reid. I have to give the range. Okay, fine. The range is from between $50 to $75 an hour. Then Dr. Naomi Reid says, okay, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so now that I share the range with you, would you think you would accept? Do you have an offer for me? Well, not an offer, but a potential offer. Would it be like, let's say, what would be an offer you would accept? Then you would say, the top of the range would work for me. Well, we cannot offer the top of the range. Okay, then how close to the top of the range can you get? We can probably do 65. Thank you for sharing that. Are you committing? I'd like to talk to the hiring team. I'd like to learn a little bit more about the job. This is our initial conversation. But thank you so much for being so honest and transparent with me. Make no commitment in verbal or in writing, and continue that. And how it develops, later you have an interview, second, third, you are learning more about the team, about the job. And then you can say, now that I've learned more about what my commitment would look like, $75 an hour is probably less for the responsibilities they're asking me to perform. My desired salary for this particular role is $85 an hour. Oh, we cannot do that. I completely understand. Thank you for sharing. When you can do that, let me know, and I'll continue the interview process with you. You always have leverage, and know that you have it. It's not aggressive. It's just what it takes to do to get the salary that you deserve.
Excellent. That was a great example, with the only caveat of those figures were devastatingly low at all ranges. And as you know, I know it was an example, but let me tell you, when I scroll on LinkedIn, I see those offers for full physician salaries that are $50, $75, $80 an hour. We're not doing that. All the listeners, I've had recruiters offer me $62 an hour to resuscitate newborns on weekends. That is not acceptable. I actually tell doctors, let's go into, if we're talking about hourly salaries, which are hourly rates, which are different, of course, than a full-time type salary. But we're kind of talking about two different things here. So what you just described were hourly rates, which is probably a contracting type job, a locums type job, rather than a full-time job. But at the same time, I don't think any physician needs to go into any negotiation considering anything less than $150 an hour. So, but you described that perfectly. So I think a lot of physicians, the minute that they are quote unquote lowballed, they immediately feel so offended. You should know my worth. But also I don't feel in any way empowered to come back and to counter offer or to assert what I feel like I deserve. So what you're saying is I shouldn't just slam down the phone, be offended, and go back to the job I'm unhappy with?
There are a lot of rewards to salary negotiation. You get the salary that you deserve and sometimes more. And a lot of physicians simply don't negotiate. And that's really baffling to me. Going back to hourly versus salary, the entire compensation package is very complex. Right. And it's very important to understand that there is the hourly or the salary pay. There's the hourly or the salary pay. There can be an annual bonus. There's vacation. There's relocation package. There's 401k match. There's benefits. And so it's really a good idea to sit down and jot those down and see what the total comp looks like to be able to at least compare to other offers versus just hearing a number and know that that's off-putting and move on from it.
Sure. Okay.
sometimes I talk to candidates and we talk about compensation, and I say, okay, so this role pays X amount of dollars an hour, and they immediately say, that's not for me, thank you so much, and they hang up the phone. And I'm thinking, wait,
Right.
I am not just one person. I am a person who has a whole network behind me. Why
Right.
don't you want to maintain a relationship with me? You can say, the salary is lower than my desired salary. I'd love to continue the conversation with you. Maybe you know about the roles that are more responsibility and more salary. Use the recruiter as somebody who's not just one person, but has a whole network of recruiters and hiring team behind them. And so don't walk away simply because you're hearing a number that is lower than what you expected. Let's talk a little bit more about the offer. The offer should not be a shock or a surprise at the end of 2 months of interviewing. This is why it's a continuous conversation. You start with the question, what would my offer look like? In the very first conversation, you share the range. I told you, that I thanked you for the range. And you can even ask, what would my potential offer look like? You start there. And then after the first interview, you can come back to the conversation and say, I've learned a little bit more about the role. I think that for this role, my desired salary, now that I know more about it and my responsibilities, would be a little bit higher. So these conversations happened over and over and over and over. In an ideal situation, if they truly happened and it was back and forth, then when the actual offer is in front of you, there's no surprise at all. And when it's no surprise at all, even then you have a little bit more leverage and you can negotiate anywhere from 10% to 15%. It feels like a low ball. It feels like a shock when there's no conversation at all.
Right.
And then, I put all this effort and here's my offer, really.
You're describing a process, right? It's more than 1 to 2 conversations. And we had a contract attorney on the podcast who said, one of the best things physicians can do is start their search early, accounting for the fact that there should be months. This is so important. We've trained for years. We may be staying in this job for years. So this can't be a decision that's made in a couple of days or a couple of even weeks. It needs to happen over time. So give yourself time to start negotiating. If you're at the end of your training, if you're in your final year, in the fall, we need to start having real substantive conversations with recruiters and having as many of these as possible. I know that as physicians also, we are rooted in one location. I would encourage physicians to cast a wide net. Please look in multiple cities, multiple areas. I think other industries, especially highly educated professionals, they recognize, listen, I may have to go, to a city or a part of the country I don't necessarily want to, but this is a good first job and maybe I can be able to move. I recognize physicians, maybe got houses, kids, we're trying to catch up with our colleagues because we're finishing training in our 30s, and we just want to root and plant. But sometimes different facilities can know that. And one more thing, and this may be something you can speak on or not, but I've seen too many stories. I've heard too many accounts of physicians staying at their training institutions and getting lower offers than if they had left. So if you're an attending and you love your institution, you maybe went to medical school there and residency there, and you want to stay as an attending, I'm so sorry to tell you, there's a high chance you'll get a lower offer than someone coming in from an outside institution that they know they have to lure in with a higher offer. You think your loyalty will be rewarded. Unfortunately, I've seen too often that is not the case. So please cast a wide net, apply to multiple institutions. And as you've described, we kind of have to be duplicitous. We have to have multiple offers. We kind of have to play a dance and game, which is so uncomfortable for us. We want to be honest. We want to be truthful and transparent always. But this needs to be a little bit more nuanced and artful.
Yeah. There's a way to get a raise in your current job. And there's 3 ways. 1, you can find out your peers getting more money. Go in with that information and say, what the actual heck? And that's how you get a raise. Another one, you may not feel comfortable with it, but you may say that you've been persuaded by another hospital or another clinic, and they are literally giving you an offer without an interview. And here it is. I am loyal. I wasn't looking. They came and found me and they said this is an offer. And number 3, the best way to get a pay raise is to leave and get it somewhere else where from the get-go you have that negotiating leverage.
That's right. I have found the latter to be so true. Unfortunately, our labor truly is our only leverage, our only true leverage as physicians. I've asked for raises, I've written strongly worded emails, but until I walk out the door or truly hand in resignation or say, listen, if this is a short time contracting type work and my position, this part of it is over, I'm not coming back until I've got an increased salary. That is the only time the increases happen. And that is a very uncomfortable thing, again, for, I'd say everyone, but particularly physicians. We are so loyal. We are a little scared of the unknown. We don't want to move around. We don't want to learn a new EMR. We don't want to learn a new system. And so we stay. But, you know, as I say multiple times, we can learn new things. We can go different places. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your colleagues and don't forget to subscribe for more discussions like this. And if you find yourself ready to make a change and are ready to explore the many career options available to you, visit doctoringdifferently.com for guidance and resources.